Welcome back to the discussion on External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj's visit to Bangladesh. Now, we talked about the land boundary, we talked about the Tista waters, but there are other issues. In fact, Bangladesh has become a major trading partner for India. There's been booming trade, but there are also problems in a sense. There is a trade deficit which is working in India's favor. Now, just as we complain about trade deficit with Bangladesh, with China, the Bangladeshis have the same problem. Pranay, I think when in a visit, I think she's talked about this issue, saying that, look, India is committed to addressing the trade deficit issue. And she's talked about, interestingly, a proposal that, look, can India invest in special economic zones? Is it possible to put together a package where, just as we are suggesting to the Chinese, look, we'll offer a special economic zone. Is that something where Indian companies invest in Bangladesh, then export back to India so that their jobs are created in Bangladesh, trade deficit is addressed? You see that as a serious possibility?
Yeah, this has been a proposal for a while. I mean, it's not, that this is something new. For various reasons, we couldn't really push through because of every single time that you talk about trade, they say because something or the other derails it. The trust that is missing, which has always been a problem. In this case, right early on, you are putting these things on the table from where you can really push it back. One advantage is that the previous government had removed much of the tariff, non-tariff barrier for the cotton export and other thing that they have, so for the textile. So that would perhaps give the industry in Bangladesh also some kind of a confidence. Now, the more you meet each other, the more you engage, you can develop that kind of a trust and confidence, where all these things are possible. And we are talking about mainland India. Northeast is extremely important, where it's a huge market there. So you can feed that market. And if you set up stuff, it generates employment in Bangladesh, which is a huge problem for them. So I think it's really a win-win situation for both sides.
Ambassador Pinak, we've been talking about transit for India between India and the Northeast. Pranay was talking about, and then the question of the old waterways have kind of fell into disuse, old railways have fallen into disuse. Is there a way that we can give this idea of transit much more vigorously to look? Is there a way India can help build these facilities inside Bangladesh, and so that Bangladesh benefits from transit trade, India gets connectivity between mainland and the Northeast? Is that doable agenda for the coming years?
When one looks at transit, I think it is generally accepted that it'll be good for both countries. But don't forget, transit is held sometimes as a point of negotiation and bargaining, because Bangladesh feels that if we give away transit, then India may not be interested in giving us the things that we want, like sharing of waters and other things, because they think that for India transit is a very big deal, and so hence they feel that this is a point of leverage for us with India. But yes, transit is going to, in fact, before the partition, this whole area was an integrated area. Chittagong was the port which everybody used, and all goods and services flowed from each from one across the borders, the current borders. And so this transit is going to help a lot because it will reduce cost, it will reduce transactional cost as well, transport cost. So transit for Mizoram, for example, is hugely important because Mizoram produces ginger and pineapple in huge fairly large quantities, but they rot in Mizoram. They cannot be moved across. So if they can be moved across even into Bangladesh for processing or whatever, and Bangladesh then re-exports it back to India through some other channels, that would help the trade deficit as well. But let us also not forget, it is very unlikely that Bangladesh will ever be able to wipe out this trade deficit, because it's just not possible, because Bangladesh does not produce the kind of goods that are required in India. Hence, the idea of an SEZ with Indian manufacturers producing and re-exporting is an excellent one and should be pursued.
Just briefly on the infrastructure, is there capacity like the roads to carry it? Isn't there a need for developing infrastructure itself?
I think the argument has been made that big trucks, etc., cannot travel through Bangladesh. But transshipment can take place. Bangladeshi trucks are anyway plying on their roads. They can use it. Our bigger trucks need not go. But what I'm more concerned about is how do we utilize the waterways and the rail routes, because rail by far is is cheaper than road, and waterways is the cheapest mode of transport. And we have the waterways. It needs dredging, it needs revitalization, it just needs a bit of management, and of course some investment in terms of dredging and things like that.
Pranay, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say two things. One, we are not using the word transit any longer, if you see, because it has become such a politicized kind of a thing. That's why the stress is more on connectivity, more and more. Because, you know, I mean, it's the same thing, but you're not using that word. And I agree with what Ambassador Pinak Chakrabarty just said, that yes, of course, railway is a very important one, because it also carries large number of people, you know, going from Dhaka to Chittagong or to other big cities that they have. That will help in a big way. And it's also something which will be there, you know, you can say that as a mark of friendship with the two countries, this is what you've done, which really affects larger number of people there.
Ambassador Muni, Professor Muni, I mean, you're also Ambassador Muni when you served as Ambassador in Laos. Now, the interesting question is, you mentioned China earlier. Now, I think India's inability to, you know, advance economic cooperation has seen Chinese entry. Chinese now are going to build a bridge across Padma, which will actually connect the two sides of Bangladesh much more clearly. And then the Chinese are also interested in building a port at a place called Sonadia off Chittagong. Now, is there a room here that, look, I think the minister talked about it, that look, can India facilitate big investments? Are we prepared to make some big commitments, say, look, we can build a bridge, another project, another big bridge project, say, participate in the development of the Sonadia? Is there a way of saying, instead of just objecting to what the Chinese do, can we initiate ideas where we begin to invest in the infrastructure of Bangladesh?
Well, I think we should, but you know, our purses cannot match the Chinese. This is number one. Number two, the Chinese have been floating this idea of BCIM for a long time.
Just explain that a bit.
The Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar link, which is so vital for Chinese Yunnan province to send its products to a burgeoning market in South Asia. The Chinese will push into South Asia very strongly for two very important reasons. One is the vulnerable periphery, Tibet and Xinjiang, leave that apart. But also the second one is burgeoning market of South Asia, 1.6 billion people, which is gradually growing economically. The Chinese cannot ignore it. Therefore, somewhere in Delhi, people should sit down and say that this, you can't wish it away. You have to take the bull by horn. Now, whether you can economically do it or politically and diplomatically do it is a question which needs to be sorted out. I may also mention that, you know, our hesitation earlier has helped Bangladeshis to politicize all these issues which you mentioned recently, be it trade, be it connectivity, be it transit, be it anything. The Chinese also have huge trade surplus with Bangladeshis. They don't make it political. And incidentally, the Chinese offered it 2 years back to Bangladesh that we will come and invest in you and take the goods back in one form or the other, which we are now planning to do. So I think this is a vital issue for entire South Asian diplomacy, and that's why I mentioned that the countries which are being chosen, the third country which is very critical is Nepal, where Prime Minister has said he would be visiting next. Then it would be Sri Lanka. Pakistan is in a different category altogether. So yes, this is a major challenge we have to face, and we have to sort out our own strategy as to how we are going to do it.
Ambassador Pinak Chakrabarty, I mean, I think our government, when Chinese Prime Minister came here, we said, look, we are willing to study the concept of the BCIM corridor. Now, is it possible that, look, we can participate with others?
No, we have in principle agreed,
Raja. That's what I'm saying.
Last time when Manmohan Singh went, he had agreed to the Chinese Prime Minister.
So, is there a way that, look, instead of seeing as a zero-sum game, for example, in Sonadia project, I mean, since nobody can put in $10 billion, I mean, even the Chinese, you know, there's going to be a lot of financial support from the international lending institutions. But the fact that if we say, look, we are willing to partner other countries, maybe Japan, maybe somebody else, is that way of a creativity in terms of dealing with infrastructure? Because some of that can be used by Northeast as well. That if China builds good roads, I mean, it's not necessarily, look, they're not going to take it away with them. So, is there a new thinking in Delhi on how do we expand infrastructure, trans-border infrastructure, and how do we collaborate?
You see, one of the things about China is that, as Professor Muni said, that they have deep pockets, and we perhaps cannot match it. But we also have a problem in the sense that we have not really gone into a big ticket item except for some other countries, but in Bangladesh we've not done it. So we have let the Chinese do the bridges, do the infrastructure and some other things. Bangladesh Railways is in desperate need of upgradation, and we can do it. This is something we are capable of doing. We have the money, perhaps, you know, the LOC, etc., that we have extended can easily be used for this. But again, we are stuck in our implementation because we have to rely on IRCON and some of the agencies that I'm afraid to say this, but they do not perform as per our plans. So we have to think of a new way of implementing some of these things. Perhaps invite the private sector. I think this is high time we should invite the private sector and get them involved in all these things. Now, I also differ from some views which says that China is going to do this and we should start worrying about it. China is only building infrastructure. That infrastructure is going to help both countries.
Thank you, Pinak. I think that's all the time we have, and I think we've discussed a number of issues that today invite India and Bangladesh to work more closely together in the coming years. There's talk that Mr. Modi will go there and Sheikh Hasina might come here. I think this exchange of high-level visits and making them routine should help us make the relationship much stronger and to look forward to a vigorous, sustainable strategic partnership between India and Bangladesh in the coming months and years. Thank you for watching. Join us again next week for the next edition of Wide Angle.